In the name of God, the Gracious, the Merciful, all praises to God, and peace be upon His servants whom He chose. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today's topic is about Hoor Ein according to the Quran. In the glorious Quran, the Almighty God says, كَذَلِكَ وَزَوَّجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورٍ عِينٍ. So it is, and we coupled them with Hoor Ein. God also says, مُتَّكِئِينَ عَلَى سُرُرٍ مَصْفُوفَةٍ وَزَوَّجْنَاهُم بِحُورٍ عِينٍ. Leaning on furnishings that are lined, and we coupled them with Hoor Ein. God also says, وَحُورٌ عِينٌ كَأَمْثَالِ اللُّؤْلُؤِ الْمَكْنُونِ, and Hoor Ein like pearls that are protected. And finally, حُورٌ مَقْصُورَاتٌ فِي الْخِيَامِ, Houries confined in tree canopies. These are the 4 verses in the Quran that talk about Houries or Hoor Ein. And according to traditional Islam, Hoor Eins are the virgin women that the men will receive in paradise as a reward. And this idea of Houris being some women, or more specifically virgin women, stems from the Hadith literature. And here is an example of what some of the Hadith literature says. According to the Hadith, the Prophet said, a Houri is a most beautiful young woman with a transparent body. The marrow of her bones is visible like the interior lines of pearls and rubies. She looks like red wine in a white glass. She is of white color, free from routine physical disabilities of an ordinary woman, such as menstruation, menopause, urinal and awful discharge, childbearing, and the related pollution. A Houri is a girl of tender age, having large breasts which are round, pointed, and not inclined to dangle. Houris dwell in palaces of splendid surroundings. So this gives us an idea as to what the perception of the Hoor Ein are according to traditional Islam. And what's really odd about this is that the most common translation still will not translate Hoor Ein as women, but instead they translate it as large or round eyes. Here are 3 examples. It says fair women with large beautiful eyes, companions that are pure, beautiful of eye, or if you really want to be nice, you just say lovely companions. So what we want to do today is to actually strip away the whole notion of Hoor Ein being any women and actually focus on the root words. What do the root words actually mean? And then reapproach the verses that contain these 2 words and then try to see if God is actually talking about something else or not. Let's begin. So let's define the first word, which is Hoor. And it comes from the root word ha-wa-ra, and it means a thing that returns to its original position or place. A cycle, basically. So if you have something at point A, and it goes to point B, C, and comes back to A, this process is called Hoor. It's basically a cycle. And we can see this definition in the Quran. In 84:14, it says, he thought he would not yahoor. Yahoor means to return. Basically, he was at God, then he went to the earth, then went back to God. He thought he would not yahoor, return to God. In 1834, he said to his friend while he was yuhawiruhu, conversing with him. So when you are having a debate with someone, it's called hiwar because the conversation is going back and forth. It's going through a cycle, and this is called hiwar. So basically, Hoor, according to the root meaning, it simply means a cycle. The next word is Ein, and it comes from the root a-ya-na, and it means anything that constantly emits or spills energy. Anything that spills or emits energy at a consistent basis is called Ein. And this is why in the Arabic language, the eyes are called Uyun or A'yun, like in 583, because the eyes, they shed tears. When you open your eyes and you're looking at something, you're constantly emitting an energy. This is also why, for example, 51:15, it says the righteous will be in gardens and Uyun, springs. This is why a spring of water is called Uyun or Ain because it is constantly emitting water. The same thing in 7:160, where God told Moses, strike the stone with your staff, thus 12 Ayun, springs, burst out of it. So anything that emits energy is called Ain. So here I'm going to translate it as constant. Something that's consistently emitting energy is called Ain. So according to the definitions of Hoor Ein simply means constant cycles, or cycles that are constant. So far we have seen that Hoor Ein, according to the root definition, simply means constant cycles. So now that we know that Hoor Ein means constant cycles, we can apply this definition into these 4 verses. But before doing so, I'd like to point something important out. The words Hoor Ein in the Quran is a general term. It is not a specific or proper noun like Hoor al-Ain or al-Hoor al-Ain. And the difference between these two is the additional al in the term. This al, when in Arabic, when we speak of someone or something that has a specific or known quality, we add the word al, which is equivalent to the in English. The al signifies that this person or thing has a certain quality. And in the Quran, God does not say Hoor al-Ain or al-Hoor al-Ain. He says Hoor Ein, meaning it's a very general term. This is no different than me, for example, saying Masih. Masih means to wipe or anoint. It could be anyone or anything. But when we say Al-Masih, the Messiah, then we are specifically talking about Jesus because he is known to be of that person. So similarly, when we look at Hoor Ein in the Quran, there is no Al, there's only Hoor Ein, leaving it a very general and very open term, meaning constant cycles. So let's begin looking at each verse. So the first verse we would like to look at is Surah 55 verse 72. In context it reads, "And besides these will be 2 other gardens, in them 2 springs which gush forth. In them are fruits, date palms, and pomegranate. In them is what is good and beautiful. Cycles, hurun, confined in canopies, never touched by man before nor jinn, leaning on glistening greens and beautiful surroundings." Now the common interpretation here is that the hurun is in reference to the women who are confined in canopies and they've never been touched before, so they are virgins. So what I'd like to do here is to reapproach this entire passage with the word hurun based on its root definition, which is cycles. I'm also going to point out a few Arabic key words here that will help us understand exactly what God is talking about. God says, "And besides these will be 2 other gardens. In them," the them here is in masculine form, which refers to the 2 gardens. So God is saying, in them, the 2 gardens, are 2 springs which gush forth. In them also masculine form, which refers to the 2 gardens. So God is saying, in them, the 2 gardens, are fruits, date palms, and pomegranate. But then there's a sudden shift. God says, in them, in feminine form. God is no longer talking about the 2 gardens. He says, fihinna. Instead, what God is talking about are the fruits, because that's the first occurrence of the feminine form. So God is saying, in them the 2 gardens are fruits, feminine form, date palms and pomegranate. In them the fruits is what is good and beautiful. Then God describes the qualities of these fruits as cycles confined in canopies. Hurun maqsuratun fil khiyam. So God is not talking about women or sex. God is talking about the qualities of the fruits. He calls them hurun, meaning that these fruits go through these cycles, and they are everlasting cycles. So God is saying cycles of these fruits are confined in canopies, and they've never been touched by man before nor jinn. Simply, you pick a fruit and another one comes out, and henceforth it has not been touched by man before nor jinn. And these fruits are leaning on glistening greens and beautiful surroundings. So as we can see, God is talking about the qualities of the fruits. The hurun here is all about the qualities of fruits. There's no sex, there's no women, there's nothing of that sort. God is simply talking about the fruits. Let's look at another verse. The next verse is Surah 56 verses 22 through 23. In context it reads, "And fruits from what they choose, and meat of birds from what they desire, and constant cycles, Hoor Ein, like pearls that are protected." Now from a rational perspective, it does not make sense, for me at least, to compare beautiful women to pearls. Instead, if we understood Hoor Ein as constant cycles, then it would make far more sense that these constant cycles will be comparable to protected pearls. And this is because a pearl, when it is protected, and it's in its shell basically, A pearl is basically produced by concentrated nacre layers. So layer upon layer of nacre creates this pearl. And this layer upon layer of nacre is comparable to the idea of constant cycles. Basically, constant cycles means that something keeps regenerating, keeps reproducing, it basically does not diminish. You pick a fruit, it comes back. It's a constant cycle. And this is all that the words Hoor Ein mean. We don't see anything about women or sex or anything of that sort at all. All we see is fruits, meats, and constant cycles. Let's try the next verse. The next verse is Surah 52, verse 20. In context, it reads, "Eat and drink happily because of what you used to do." And they reclined on arranged beds, and we paired them with constant cycles, Hoor Ein. Now I'd like to bring your attention to this last phrase here, where it says, وَزَوَّجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورٍ عِينٍ. And oftentimes, زَوَّجْنَاهُم is understood as being married. But when we look at the root meaning of the word زَوَّجْنَاهُم, it simply means to be paired with something. So it does not necessarily mean marriage. And in the context of this verse and the linguistic aspect of this phrase, we see that it is not about marriage. First of all, if God was really talking about marriage, then God would have said Hoor Ein, because the El here signifies a specific person and or a person with a specific quality. But God says here Hoor Ein. He does not say Al Ein. Secondly, we can compare this phrase to 33:37, where God does indeed talk about marriage. He says زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. We married you to her. But we need to pay attention here. When it comes to marriage, actual marriage, God uses a pronoun. He says زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. We married you to her. But in this verse about Hoor Eins, God uses a preposition. He says we paired them with constant cycles. زَوَّجْنَاهُم بِي Hoor Ein. So linguistically, it makes no sense whatsoever that God is talking about marriage. He would have used a pronoun, not a preposition, if it's about marriage. So the question is now, what are we being paired with? We are being paired with the constant cycles. And what are these constant cycles? The constant cycles, according to my understanding, are the souls are paired with new bodies. The bodies are called Hoor Ein. That means that the body itself regenerates itself. It does not get old. It's always new. And this is indicated in 81:7, where God says, وَإِذَا النُّفُوسُ زُوِّجَتْ, the same word being used, زُوِّجَتْ. When the souls are paired, they are paired with new bodies. And so here's a depiction where we can see a soul being paired with a new body. So in paradise, you will be paired with constant cycles. The Hoor Ein is your body itself, the new body that God is going to give you that's going to be regenerating itself. This is simply what God is talking about. Again, there's no mentioning here of women or sex. Let's try the next verse. And lastly, Surah 44, verse 54. God says the righteous will be in a secure place among gardens and springs, wearing silk and satin, facing each other. So it is like this, and we coupled them with constant cycles, Hoor Ein. They will call therein every kind of fruit. They will be secure. They will not taste therein the death, except the first death. Now, God here also uses, we coupled them with Hoor Ein, زَوَّجْنَاهُم بِحُورٍ عِينٍ. Now, the point that I made in the previous verse also applies here, so keep that in mind. But I'd also like to point something else out here. God says, so it is like this. And the question is, it is like what? It is like wearing silk and satin. So God says, so it is like this, wearing the silk and satin, that we coupled them with Hoor Ein. And again, the wearing here is your soul, you as a person wearing a new body called Hoor Ein. Or actually, it's a quality of Hoor Ein. It does not get old. It regenerates itself. And this is indicated by the last verse, where God says, they will not taste therein the death, except the first death, that we have already experienced actually. So God here is saying that the Hoor Ein, the new body that you are going to wear, is not going to experience any death. This is what Hoor Ein is. And again, we don't see anything about women or sex. So all in all, based on the 4 verses that we've seen, if we just take it based on the root meaning of the word, we can get a very, very different understanding of what Hoor Ein means. Now, aside from the Hoor Ein verses, there are other verses in the Quran that have been severely misinterpreted to cater for sexual connotations. And I'm going to share with you here a couple. In 78:31 through 33, it says, إِنَّ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ مَفَازًا حَدَائِقَ وَأَعْنَابًا وَكَوَاعِبَ أَتْرَابًا. The common interpretation, and I believe I got these from Sahih International, it says, Indeed for the righteous is attainment, gardens and grapevines, and full-breasted companions of equal age. To me, when I'm reading this, I don't see how the breasts are coming about. Like, where did they interpret breasts in this passage? Instead, to me, the Quranic interpretation, this is of course my interpretation, indeed for the righteous is triumph, gardens and grapevines and grapes, and protrusions of plants at equal heights. God is talking about gardens and grapes, and the protrusions are of these plants, and they are at equal heights. There's no mention of women or breasts or anything like that. God is simply talking about kawaib atraba, protrusions at equal heights. That's all it is. And even in Arabic, the kawa'ib is often referred to the grapevines. So I don't understand how this interpretation came about. Let's try another verse. 37:48 through 49. وعندهم قاصرات الطرف عين كأنهن بيض مكنون. The common interpretation, and with them will be women limiting their glances with large beautiful eyes as if they were delicate eggs well protected. Again, the word women does not occur in the passage, and obviously this, and again, the whole thing with the eyes and eggs and the women looking like eggs, I'm not quite sure how this is coming about. Instead, the Quranic interpretation, which is my interpretation, I should say, and at them will be lowered edges that are constant, low-hanging fruit. It's as if they are eggs protected. And of course, and the grammar here does not really make sense, but basically, God here is saying that there are low-hanging fruit within reach. عندهم قاصرات الطرف عين, and they are constant. So there's a constant low-hanging fruit at them, and these fruits are comparable to protected eggs. This is as simple as it gets because this is really what the Arabic text is saying. There's nothing about women, nothing about sex, and I don't know why God would compare women to eggs. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So to conclude, the Quranic Hoor Ein has nothing to do with women or sex. That stuff is found in the Hadith literature. Instead, Hoor Ein in the Quran is a general term, and it simply means an infinite replenishment of things. It means constant cycles. And your heavenly body that you will receive in paradise will be of a Hoor Ein quality. And you will also receive fruits, drinks, meats, all sorts of food, everything around you basically will be of Hoor Ein. I hope this has helped you understand and maybe expand your horizon regarding what Hoor Ein means in the Quran, and inshallah we'll see you in the next video.